If you don't know where to start with Croatia's NIS2 cybersecurity laws and regulations, then this video is for you. So I'll show you which NIS2 laws and regulations did Croatia publish. Then I'll share the screen and show you the key requirements from all of these documents. And then I'll also share a screen and show you how to write a couple of policies and procedures to comply with these requirements. So after you watch this video, you'll have a clear idea on what the key requirements are and also what steps you need to take to comply with these requirements. Okay, let's see first which laws and regulations did Croatia publish as part of this NIS2 transposition. So first, Croatia published this Cybersecurity Law back in 2024. And by the way, it was one of the first countries in European Union to actually transpose this NIS2 directive. And then also in 2024, it published this Cybersecurity Regulation, which is basically an implementing regulation for this cybersecurity law. And then in 2025, this Croatian Information Systems Security Bureau published these guidelines for self-assessment of cybersecurity measures. And these guidelines had three annexes. Annex A is this self-assessment calculator. Annex B is basically around the methodology for self-assessment. And Annex C is by far the most interesting one. This is the list of controls. And by the way, below this video you'll find the links to all of these documents. Now, what are the differences between all of these documents? So this top-level cybersecurity law, it basically describes some general things which companies need to comply. How is the supervision performed, which government body performs this role of this National Cybersecurity Authority, how is this National Cybersecurity Strategy written, and it mentions these cybersecurity measures very slightly, so not really in detail. On the other hand, this implementing regulation is much more detailed, and as you will see in a minute when I show you the screen, you will see that this Annex 2 from this regulation actually goes into very detail and describes how cybersecurity needs to be managed and which areas need to be covered. And then when I show you this Annex C from this guidance, then you will see that this list of controls goes even deeper and prescribes actually a list of more than 100 controls that need to be implemented by companies that are in scope of this cybersecurity law. Now, it's also worth mentioning here that there is also this CIR, which stands for Commission Implementing Regulation 2024-2690. And basically this CIR prescribes in very detail various cybersecurity measures that companies need to implement. Now, this CIR was actually published by the European Union Commission, and it is actually valid in all countries of European Union, including Croatia. However, it is not valid for all sectors within the NIS2 scope. And as you will see later on, there are 18 sectors that are covered in NIS2 scope. And out of these 18 sectors, this CIR is only valid for 3 sectors, which cover these digital critical infrastructure companies. So what does this mean? If your company is classified as a digital critical infrastructure company in Croatia, then you have to comply with this cybersecurity law, cybersecurity regulation, this list of controls, but also with CIR. Whereas if your company is not a digital company, let's say that your company is a water utility, then it only needs to comply with the cybersecurity law, the cybersecurity regulation, and this annex with all of these controls. But such a company does not need to comply with CIR. And you can take a look at my other video which speaks in more detail about this CIR, and you can find the link below. Okay, let me now show you a couple of key points that companies that need to comply with this NIS2 law and regulation and this annex with the list of controls, so what exactly they need to comply with. Okay, I'm showing you now this cybersecurity law here. On the left hand side you can see this original text in Croatian, and on the right hand side you can see the translation into English, and basically this is an automatic translation, but it's pretty good. Anyway, let's scroll down and I'll show you first these requirements related to the essential and important entities. As you can see here, basically it's specified, who are essential, who are important entities. Yeah, let's move forward to cybersecurity requirements. So as you can see here, some general requirements, but here you can actually see some requirements related to cybersecurity training. By the way, I have a separate video which explains, how to implement this NIS2 cybersecurity training and awareness. You can see the link below. And then here you actually see some kind of a list of cybersecurity measures that are needed. Now, these are very high level. As you will see in the implementing regulation, these measures are much more detailed. And then as we move forward, you will see that there are some requirements related to the audit of cybersecurity and also self-assessment of cybersecurity. And you will notice in English version that these are actually marked in red. This basically means that these requirements are something that are on top of these European documents, European NIS2 directive and this CIR 2024-2690. So these are the requirements that are specific for Croatia. Anyway, when we scroll further, let me show you this expert supervision. So basically here there is a requirement for this expert supervision of the implementation of these cybersecurity measures. And there is one interesting requirement regarding suspensions. So basically, if the company is not compliant with cybersecurity law and regulation, actually there is a possibility that it loses its license to operate, and also that these executives that work in these companies are also suspended. So this is something also that is on top of the requirements from NIS2 directive. Okay, when you scroll down, you will see these fines, and basically fines are defined here, and they're exactly the same as in NIS2 directive, so there is nothing much, let's say, new here. Okay, now let's switch to this implementing regulation. So here you can actually see the text of the implementing regulation, and when we scroll down, you will see a couple of important requirements here. So I'm skipping these parts that are not very interesting, but I just want to show you what is very important for companies that need to comply. So first of all, what is important is that these national competent authorities are actually performing this national risk assessment for each company that needs to be in NIS2 scope. And basically it defines, what are the level of risks related to each company. So it can be low risks or medium level of risks or high level of risks. And then what is important is that these companies with low level of risk will only apply this basic level of cybersecurity measures. These companies with a medium level of risk will apply this in intermediate level of cybersecurity measures, and these companies with a high level of cybersecurity risk will need to apply this advanced level of cybersecurity measures. And you will see later on when I scroll down to this Annex 2 how each and every control is then marked with what level of cybersecurity implementation is needed. And then to scroll further, you will see that there is also a further classification of these controls. One are these mandatory controls, which are marked with A. Then there are some mandatory under some conditions. These are marked with B. And then there is also voluntary controls. Basically, they are marked with C. And basically, the main condition or the main actually criteria to define whether you're going for these voluntary is to perform the risk assessments. So when the company performs its own risk assessment, then it actually defines whether it wants to apply these controls that are marked with C. So again, these levels of A, B, and C, and also these basic and intermediate and advanced level of measures, all of these are marked with red. So again, nothing like this exists in NIS2 directive or this CIR 2690. Okay, let's go further, and yeah, there is this requirement for this statement of compliance, which doesn't exist in other European documents. And let's go now to these controls. Let me actually show you how this looks like. Before I actually go for these controls, let me first show you these 18 sectors. So here you have this energy sector, then you have transportation, then you have banking, financial market infrastructure, healthcare, water, wastewater, digital infrastructure, and basically this is the first out of these three sectors for digital companies. When you scroll further, you will see this ICT service management. Basically this is the second out of these three. Then you have public sector, you have space, postal and courier services, waste management, development, production and distribution of chemicals. Then you have this food production, manufacturing, digital service providers. This is the third out of these three digital sectors. And then you have research and education systems. So basically here are 19 sectors, by the way. You have these 11, then you have these 8. This is 19, but this educational system, this is something that is added in Croatia. So basically basically, if you leave this number 8 out, then you will see exactly the same sectors as in NIS2 directive. Again, this is something that is added in Croatia, the 19th sector, which is not really covered on the European level. Okay, now let's move to this Annex number 2, which is the most important. Again, something like this does not exist in other documents, and you will notice that this Annex 2 is a bit more detailed than CIR. So CIR is also detailed, but not as detailed as something here. Anyway, so here you can see actually this number 1 or part 1 of this annex, and basically it says commitment and responsibility of persons responsible for implementing measures for managing cybersecurity risks. And here you will see, lots of these requirements here. So from 1.1 all the way to 1.11. And then for each of these, you actually see this table here. And basically it says here, for example, for this 1.1, and basically this 1.1 is that you have to define and adopt on a strategic cybersecurity policy. Okay, so for that one, it basically says that if you are a basic level of company, you must apply it. This is mandatory. If you are on a medium level of risks, you still have to apply it. And if you are on an advanced level, you still have to apply it. So basically, for any, let's say, level of risks, or if the company is classified according to any of these level of risks, still they all have to apply it. However, if you go for this 1.5, this one says that it is necessary to separate individual roles in cybersecurity matters that could result in a potential conflict of interest. If you're classified as a basic level of risk company, then this one is not mandatory. As you can see, this one is C. This one means that basically only if you, through your internal risk assessment, see that this is something that would be necessary for you, then you need to implement this. However, if you are on the intermediate level of risk, or if you are on advanced level of risk, then you would have to apply it as mandatory. Or if you go for this 1.11, this is about ensuring adequate mechanisms for monitoring the main indicators of cybersecurity status. So basically this one is not mandatory, so this is something that can be implemented if companies on all levels of risk, if they assess that this kind of measure would be needed. So as you can see, it's not very easy. It's a pretty sophisticated system that you really need to study and really define. And as you can see here, it's pretty detailed. You have number 2 is about software and hardware asset management. Number 3 is about risk management. Number 4 is about security of human resources and digital identities. Number 5 is about basic hygiene practices. Then number 6, ensuring cybersecurity of networks. Then number 7 is control of physical and logical access to network and information systems. Number 8 is about supply chain security. Number 9 is security in development and maintenance of network and information systems. Number 10 is cryptography. Number 11 is incident handling. Number 12 is business continuity and cyber crisis management. Number 13, physical security. And yeah, basically this is it. So these 13 chapters are here. And then there is also this Annex number 3, which basically specifies special physical security measures for entities in digital infrastructure sector. So there are some additional requirements for these digital infrastructure sectors. They are specified here. And then at the end you see some forms that are needed. This is the declaration of compliance. Okay, now let's see for this Annex C, this catalog of controls from this Bureau of Information Systems. And yeah, I'll show you this content first. As you can see there, numerous controls. As I mentioned, more than 100 of them. So the first one is existing of strategic cybersecurity policy document. The second one is avoiding conflict of interest. Then physical security policy, password and authentication policies, and so on and so forth. I'll just browse through just for you to actually get a feeling for this. As you can see, many of these controls here. Yeah, of course, today I'm not going to go through all of these. It would be a very lengthy video. In any way, let me just show you one of these just for you to get a feeling. So let me just browse through and see where is the first control. Okay, here it goes. So the first one is existence of strategic cybersecurity policy document. And here you actually have a description of what this should be. And you also have these evaluation guidelines. So it is defined what is the maturity of this particular control So maturity number 1 would be that this document does not exist at all, and that number 5 would be that this document exists, that contains all the mandatory elements, has been adopted, implemented, updated as needed, effectiveness is assessed, this kind of thing. So basically, this is really about the maturity of this control. And what is interesting, you also have these references to ISO 27001, 22301, which is a business continuity standard, then this NIST SP 800-53, and also NIST cybersecurity framework. When we scroll down to this control number 2 about avoiding conflicts of interest in cybersecurity, basically the same thing. You have actually the definition here, how this control needs to be implemented, and also how to assess the level of maturity. And let me now show you how to write a couple of documents to cover all of these requirements, and also how to reduce the effort needed for this compliance effort. Okay, I'm showing you now this policy on information system security. This is a document from Advisera's NIS2 documentation toolkit. Again, on the left hand side you can see this Croatian version, and on the right hand side is exactly the same version in English. Let me scroll down to this table of contents. So as you can see here, basically these are all the, let's say, general requirements for cybersecurity. So this document does not really define or describe how to manage the details of cybersecurity. It describes some general roles and responsibilities, the goals. Basically describes, how the senior management controls cybersecurity. Anyway, when we scroll down to this reference documents, you will see several references here. So this Cybersecurity Law, then Cybersecurity Regulation, then this Annex C with a list of controls. Then there is this European NIS2 directive. Then there is this CIR 2690. Also this ENISA technical implementation guidance. I didn't mention this before, but basically this is a guidance that is published by European Cybersecurity Agency, and this is really about the implementation of this CIR 2690. There is the cybersecurity standard ISO 27001, and you will also see references to particular articles and controls within these documents. Now I'll explain why all of these documents are important in a minute, but let me just scroll down to show you one detail here. So basically here in this section 4, it is described how the company needs to plan and implement all of these cybersecurity controls. And in the section 4.5, let me just scroll down also the English version. In the section 4.5, it is described how it controls cybersecurity. And basically it says here that this audit of the cybersecurity will be performed at least once every 2 years. And then there is also this cybersecurity self-assessment. And if you remember from this cybersecurity law, this is something that is specifically specified there. And here you can actually see some comment on, that this is mandatory only for essential entities according to this cybersecurity law, and also to which type of companies this is basically applicable. Now, these requirements for cybersecurity audit and cybersecurity self-assessment, these requirements do not exist in other documents. This is something that we added specifically because of Croatian cybersecurity law. So as you can see, this is how we adapted these documents for local legislation. Which actually brings me, why are all of these documents that I mentioned important in the beginning? I mean, these references. So I'll briefly explain how do we create actually these documents, and we found that this three-step process is the best actually for writing these documents. So first, we write the documents according to these international standards, primarily according to ISO 27001. Why do we think this is a good basis? Because really this standard explains this, how you govern, how you organize the management of cybersecurity. It explains really in the best way. Then as a second step, we adapt all of these documents for these European documents, primarily NIS2 directive, the CIR 2690, and also according to this ENISA guidance. And then as a third step, we adapt this document and close these gaps, so to say, with local laws and regulations. And I'm not saying that you have to follow these three steps when writing your documents. I'm just saying that this kind of method has shown the best results for when we develop these documents. And of course, if you want to reduce the effort of writing these documents, you can actually use Advisera's NIS2 documentation toolkit. Okay, I'm showing you here this document called Risk Assessment Methodology. As you can see from the table of contents, it describes the method on how you assess all of these risks, basically how you treat them, how you report, and so on. When we take a look at the reference documents, there are several reference documents here. And then I wanted to show you how this document was adapted for specific requirements from this cybersecurity regulation. So as you can see here, it basically says that the company will have to be assessed by this government body for cybersecurity for some specific level of risk. And then that it will apply these controls depending on whether they are A, B, or C. And also that the A and B are basically mandatory, and that C depends really on the results of the company's risk assessment. And here, when you take a look at this comment, it basically says that you can find this list of controls from this Annex C here. And by the way, here you can also see some requirements or suggestions from ENISA technical implementation guidance. And by the way, if you want to take a look at a video which explains exactly how to fill out this document, below the video you'll find the link for this other video. Okay, hope this was helpful, and let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about this NIS2 transposition in Croatia, and I'll respond as quick as I can. And to access this NIS2 documentation toolkit in Croatian that I was showing you, click the link in the description below, and you'll be able to open this free demo account where you can actually access all of these documents and download the demo version of these documents to your local disk. And see also my next video, which explains in more detail how you can use this NIS2 documentation toolkit. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel not to miss any of my new videos. And I publish videos about cybersecurity governance and compliance, and also about AI governance every week. Thanks for watching.